Quick numbers here. To date, this calendar year, there have been almost 1.3 million apprehensions. We are averaging the last 2 months 67 to 6,800 people per day. That's a large caravan per day being apprehended by Border Patrol. 8 to 1,100 known gotaways, which would equate somewhere over 300,000 gotaways, known gotaways for the year. If you annualize these figures, been a couple 100,000 people per month. We'll be up to about 2.1 million apprehensions. Add the getaways, 300,000 to 400,000. We're up to 2.5 million people. You have repeatedly stated that our borders are not open, that they're closed. Do you honestly believe that our borders are closed?
Senator, I do. And let me speak to that. We have
let me ask you a couple questions here. This committee received, it was dated September 11th, but apparently this letter was not received till Thursday. I didn't find out about it till yesterday. I released it to the public immediately. By recently retired U.S. Border Patrol Chief Rodney Scott. In this letter, former Chief Scott states, he is sickened by the avoidable and rapid disintegration of what was arguably the most effective border security in our nation's history. Of course, the chart shows it. We'd pretty well secured the border. We'd stopped the flow of unaccompanied children. We'd stopped the flow of family units because of the migrant protection protocols, of the agreements that President Trump put in place, the building of the wall. We were serious about border security until your administration took office.
I got hairy legs.
You stood before this committee and said that you would enforce the laws. You have not done that. Let me go on. Chief Scott says, to think that well-resourced terrorist networks, criminal organizations, and hostile nations are not going to do the same, in other words, exploit the open border, is naive. Here's what's very troubling. He said the Secretary and other political appointees within DHS have provided factually incorrect information to congressional representatives and to the American public. So let me ask you, Mr. Secretary, of the 1.3 million people that we've apprehended, how many people have been returned, how many people are being detained, and how many people have been dispersed? And I want some numbers here. So we've got, again, 1.3 million people. How many people have been returned? How many people are being detained? How many people have been dispersed to all points around America?
Senator, I would be pleased to provide you with that data.
I want them now. Why don't you have that information now?
Senator, I do not have that data.
Why not?
For me.
Why don't you have that basic information?
Senator, I want to be accurate in the information.
I'm looking for ballpark figures. Is it about half? Have we dispersed about half of that? Are we up to about 600,000 people we dispersed?
This is the last thing we need. And it was preventable, very easily preventable. The United States government holds tremendous sway over the Mexican economy. So with a single phone call, Joe Biden could have made absolutely certain that the Mexican government sent these migrants back to where they came from.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right this way, y'all.
A lot of good things are happening with Mexico. Mexico understands that we're going to close the border or I'm going to tariff the cars. I'll do one or the other and probably start off with the tariffs. That'll be a very powerful incentive because Mexico has the strongest immigration laws anywhere in the world. So we need help from Mexico. If Mexico doesn't give the help, that's okay. We're going to tariff their cars coming into the United States. The other thing is because Mexico is such a big source of drugs, unfortunately, now we have China sending fentanyl to Mexico so it can be delivered into the United States. It's not acceptable. So the second aspect of it is, which you haven't heard before, is that if the drugs don't stop, Mexico can stop them if they want. We're going to tariff the cars. The cars are very big. And if that doesn't work, we're going to close the border. But I think that'll work. That's massive numbers of dollars. So if we don't see people apprehended and brought back to their countries, if we see these massive caravans coming up to our country right through Mexico, coming right through Mexico like nothing. Buses are even given to them. For the last 3 days, it hasn't happened since I said we're closing the border. The only thing, frankly, better but less drastic than closing the border is to tariff the cars coming in. And I will do it, just like you know I will do it. I don't play games. I'll do it. So we're doing it to stop people. We're going to give them a 1-year warning. And if the drugs don't stop or largely stop, we're going to put tariffs on Mexico and products, in particular cars. The whole ball game is cars. It's the big ball game. With many countries, it's cars. And if that doesn't stop the drugs, we close the border.
They do not like tariffs, particularly tariffs impacting Mexico. I mean, that trade, like hundreds of millions of dollars worth daily crossing the U.S.-Mexico border, it really directly impacts manufacturers. And thirdly, this is really the most
Mexico
aggressive
has
step that
been,
we've seen coming from this way.
Capturing people and bringing them back to their countries at their southern border. They've been taking people under their very powerful laws. They have the right to do it, and they're bringing them back to where they came from. That's been about 3 days now, I guess, since they heard I was going to close the border. But before I close the border, if Mexico, and we love Mexico, we love the country of Mexico, we have two problems. We have the fact that they allow people to pour in to our country. We have to stop them. Border Patrol's been incredible. ICE has been incredible. Law enforcement's been incredible. And the other problem is drugs. Massive amounts of much of the drugs coming into our country come through the southern border in all different ways. Much of it where we don't have walls. The wall is under construction, by the way, large sections. We're going to be meeting, I think, on Friday at a piece of the wall that we've completed, a big piece. A lot of it's being built right now.
Joe Biden has not called to do that. And he hasn't because he wants these migrants here in the United States, and so they are coming. He did this on purpose. Thousands of Haitians, as you just saw, have swarmed Del Rio, Texas, which is not a big town. As of this morning, there were close to 7,000 so-called family units under the bridge there. More than 300 of those units included a pregnant woman. All of these migrants, says the Biden administration, will be allowed to stay in the United States, no questions asked, and the children born here will, of course, instantly become American citizens. None of these people, you should know this because it's telling, will undergo any kind of background check, like the background check you endure if you were to try to, say, buy a 12-gauge, according to your constitutional rights. None of them either will be forced to abide by vaccine mandates. So you need the shot to work as a nurse or for the sanitation department or anywhere. But you don't need a shot to come into our country illegally at the request of the Biden administration. Virtually none of these migrants will ever be deported. Of the more than 3,000 illegals processed in Del Rio on Sunday, only 327 were supposedly deported to Haiti, all of them single men and women. We haven't, by the way, confirmed that. That's just the claim. But even the official claim tells us that more than 90% of these Haitians got effective amnesty immediately. They got on government buses to resettle into what was, until recently, your country. On Monday, Haitians on one of those buses revolted and took control of the vehicle. They did break out of the bus and they did escape, one official told the Washington Examiner. Do things seem out of control? Well, that's because they are. Just a few hours ago, the head of DHS, the man in charge of Homeland Security, explained to the United States Congress that, in fact, he has no idea how many foreign nationals are being resettled in American neighborhoods. And he didn't seem bothered to admit that. Watch.
How many people have been returned? How many people are being detained? How many people have been dispersed to all points around America?
Senator, I would be pleased to provide you with that data.
I want them now. Why don't you have that information now?
Senator, I do not have that data.
Why not?
For me.
Why don't you have that basic information?
Senator, I want to be accurate.
Because he doesn't care. That's why he doesn't have the information, because he doesn't care, because there's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing Ron Johnson, despite his best and noble efforts, can do about it. So how could you defend this if you believed in, let's say, law? How would you defend what's happening? Well, you couldn't. There's no way to defend it. These are illegal aliens. They're not refugees. They are breaking the law with the help of the federal government. How is that okay? Well, no one in the Democratic Party bothers to explain how it's okay. Instead, they deflect. They denounce anyone who asks and calls that person a, can you guess? Can you guess what they call people who ask questions? Here's Ilhan Omar to remind you.
There is obviously systematic racism at play here.
Oh, yeah. So it's systematic racism to point out lawbreaking by foreign nationals, says the lady who married her own brother in order to scam American immigration law. Now somehow Ilhan Omar is a, quote, lawmaker, and she's calling you a racist if you don't like the fact that as a lawmaker, she is openly subverting the laws of the country that rescued her from a refugee camp in Kenya. Right. That's the new America.
Come on, man.